Hey buddy, watch this.
Hello, Geosculptor is the name, and Hearthstone is the game, and this is part 11 of my Kobolds and Catacombs card review. This time around I only have 3 new cards, but there are 2 Legendaries and 1 card with a new mechanic that we've never seen before, so this is a pretty darn exciting review nonetheless. Now up first I'll be doing my detailed reviews. If you're short on time and you want to just see my quick reviews, you can hit the link in the description below, head to those quick reviews where you can just see the card reveals and my 5-star ratings. If you're someone with a little more time that wants to hear me discuss these cards in greater detail, then I'm going to jump into my detailed reviews right now. Up first, I have the new Warlock Legendary weapon. This is the Skull of Manari, a new 5-mana 0/3 weapon that reads, at the start of your turn, summon a demon from your hand. So you play Skull of Manari, you hit the end turn button, nothing happens. You give your opponent a turn to do whatever they want to do, and then when the turn comes back to you, you pull a demon from your hand and you put it into play for free. You don't have to spend the mana on it. Now, clearly, if that were to happen 10 turns in a row, as it very well could with Skull of Manari, because the durability on this weapon doesn't go down, it can go forever, you could just pull a demon out of your hand. If that happened forever, that would be pretty crazy. That'd be super valuable. You would pull a lot of demons out for free, you'd keep refilling your hand with the Warlock hero power, and you just overwhelm your opponent with the inevitable free tempo advantage of pulling demons out, sometimes big demons like Doom Guards, etc. Of course, as is always the case with infinite value cards, unless it's Jade Idol, there are some pretty big downsides to this weapon, and in fact, downsides so enormous that I just don't think it's playable. As you noted, as I ran through the description of what happens, you play this on turn 5, and you hit the end turn button, and literally nothing happens. You don't do anything. You don't get any sort of immediate value that makes it worth it. You give your opponent an entire turn for 5 or 6 mana to do whatever they want while you did nothing. You're basically passing your turn 5. Now, the biggest risk of that, of course, is that they immediately play Harrison Jones. And they played a 5-mana 5/4 that draws them 3 cards and kills 5 of your mana. It just completely removes one of your turns from existence. There's also, of course, other oozes that can remove a weapon like this as well. So this is just unbelievably susceptible to weapon removal. A lot of the other weapons we've seen, they either have an end-of-turn effect, like the Mage Legendary weapon, or at least something that you can potentially get 1 charge of value out of, or something you can work to activate instantly, like Dragon Soul for the Priest Legendary weapon. But with this one, there's just no way to make this work until you give it back to your opponent first. You give them all the time, all the initiative to interact with this weapon before you get a chance to actually gain value. So there's a really good chance, as long as there's any weapon removal in the meta, that this card is just completely dead. But beyond that, even if your opponent doesn't deal with it, there are some risks, I think, just inherent to this card. Because the minion summoning is happening at the start of your turn, that minion doesn't even get to attack right away. Unless, of course, it's like a Doom Guard with charge. But if you just pulled out like a Despicable Dreadlord, it doesn't get to attack that turn. You have to wait another turn for it to attack. So basically, everything, as far as an attacking valuable minion with initiative, is on a 2-turn delay. Now, clearly, you can build your deck with things like Void Lords and Doom Guards so that they give more instant value. Something happens immediately when you summon them from your hand. But that doesn't get away from the weapon removal issue. So there's a giant risk there. There's some risks just inherent to the card and how it summons minions and just how slow it is. So to me, there are just too many fundamental problems with this one for it to make sense. Even if we're not in a meta where there's a lot of weapon removal, I still feel like this is just so slow, and you're basically passing a couple turns most of the time, that the potential upswings of hitting those Void Lords just isn't worth the problems that this card has every other instance. And of course, you have to build your deck in really specific ways to guarantee that. Otherwise, you might just get Flame Imps or Void Walkers or whatever it might be, and that's not enough snowballing value, snowballing tempo to make it make sense. So, Skull of the Manari to me just looks completely flawed, absolutely awful. I don't expect this is ever going to see some sort of play unless there's some just ridiculous card that synergizes with weapons or protects them from weapon removal. Even the card that adds the weapon back to your hand isn't going to work for Skull of the Manari because that's just like 13 mana you're spending essentially to play 2 Skull of the Manari and a minion as well to return that to your hand. So ultimately, this one is a complete failure as far as I'm concerned. I don't think this card is ever going to see play outside of some sort of miracle answer that somehow makes it good. So up next I have the new Warrior Legendary Minion. This is Geosculptor Yip. A new 8-mana minion, 4/8 in stats, with an effect that reads, at the end of your turn, summon a random minion with cost equal to your armor. So if you play Geosculptor Yip, you have 10 armor, you get a 10-mana minion randomly. If you have 7 armor, you get a 7-mana minion, 5, etc., so on and so forth. If you have 0 armor, presumably you are going to get a Snowflipper Penguin at this point from Geosculptor Yip, because it does say equal to your armor, and your armor can be 0. So ideally here, right, you'd have 10 plus armor, and you just constantly summon really strong 10 drops, or perhaps 8 armor might even be the magic number, because there are so many good 8-mana minions in Hearthstone these days. But 8, 9, 10 mana is really where this card starts to make more sense, because getting, you know, a 10 mana body alongside a 4/8, that's a card that has to be removed. They have to focus some removal into Geosculptor Yip, or he becomes sort of a really powerful Yashiraj that doesn't even pull from your deck, so it's even stronger value in a lot of ways because it's generating threats, not just removing them from your deck. So it's sort of infinite in some ways if they don't answer it. So you are creating a really high friction, you know, desperate situation for your opponent whenever you play Geosculptor Yip with a high armor total. Now, if you play this with a lower armor total, clearly, you know, summoning, for instance, a 2-mana minion because you play Geosculptor Yip and armor up is not nearly as powerful a play, so you might have to run things like Bring It On in particular to make this card good. Now, that said, you probably have to compromise your deck a little bit or build it in specific ways if you want Geosculptor Yip to really excel. Otherwise, he might just not do enough and might be a risky kind of thing to play, because he is actually rather slow. Unless you hit, say, a taunt minion exactly off of his summon, your opponent can just ignore this and go face. So only in certain matchups, particularly non-aggro matchups, is this card likely to really excel, because you probably just can't risk playing it most of the time in aggro. Because if you can play it in aggro and you've made it to turn 8 and you have 10 armor to make it viable and make it good, you've probably already won the game anyway. So it feels a little bit like a win more card in certain matchups there. Against more control decks, there is a home for this. It makes a little more sense. So depending on the meta, depending on the warrior deck, I do think this card is playable. It's better to me than something like Rotface. The biggest problem with Rotface is consistency. You can always activate him with whirlwinds and stuff, or the hero power from the Death Knight. But you never know what you're going to get. Sometimes you get Shifter Xeris, sometimes you get a super high roll, amazing legendary, but it's less predictable, it's less reliable. When you're summoning something at a certain cost, you have a general idea of what you're going to get. You know you're going to get a big pile of stats at the very least, sometimes a great effect. There's never a really low roll at 10 mana. Something like Cthulhu is the worst case scenario as a 6/6, and even that isn't the end of the world. But, you know, with Rotface in particular, Shifter Xeris is not a great result. Patch is often not a great result. So the variance on Rotface is much higher. Not to mention, of course, I do actually think Rotface is much harder to activate, because you have to have some second card or some other instance of damage to proc his effect. This one is just guaranteed. It happens passively, which is nice. This also just has a bigger body, so it's harder for other opponents to remove, so the potential for it to last longer is higher. So pretty much in every way, I think Geosculptor Yip makes a lot more sense than Rotface. Clearly, it's not ever going to summon like 6 minions per turn, which you could theoretically do with Rotface. But, you know, 1 or 2 at a time, slower value, but more consistent value, I think is better on average than something like Rotface. Now that said, Rotface is not a great card. It very rarely ever sees play. Warrior in general isn't seeing a lot of play right now, but Rotface not a great card. I don't think Geosculptor Yip is by any means a 5-star card. I think it's just an okay, playable legendary in control warrior, but I'm not willing to say it's strong or meta-defining or something that will encourage you to build a deck around it. By no means that. It's just the kind of card I think you're going to be able to toss in to a slower, more control warrior deck without sacrificing too much, making it merely a playable card. And then finally I have one last card here. This is a new shaman spell called Unstable Evolution, a new 1-mana evolve style spell that reads, transform a friendly minion into one that costs 1 more. But then this text at the end is the really important part. This is a new thing we've never seen before. It says repeatable this turn. What that means is if you cast Unstable Evolution on a minion, it essentially kind of stays in your hand as an echo of itself. A bit like what we've seen with Valera, the Death Knight, in the past. You can just cast it again, and again, and again, and again. It costs 1 mana each time. You can cast it as many times as you have the mana to play it, but then at the end of the turn, the card vanishes. It goes away. So you only get to do it for one turn, but what that means is this is a 1-mana spell that evolves something once, could be a 4-mana spell that evolves something 4 times, could even be a 10-mana spell that evolves something 10 times. And I think that's really, really cool. I love just how much strategy and thought and decision-making you have to put into playing this card. Also, I think it's really good because it gives you the ability to stop when you hit something great. The worst part about Evolve style effects right now is that it's completely random. You low roll sometimes, you high roll others. It feels bad when you're playing it occasionally. Sometimes it feels really bad when you're playing against it. But with Unstable Evolution, you have more control in how your Evolve effects work. So essentially, you can turn any totem into a Tyrion. It's fine. You can spend your turn spending 8 mana trying to get a Tyrion. Or if you find some great 7-mana minion, you can stop there. If you get to 6, you can say, okay, I'll get Cairn. Maybe Karen's good, but maybe I need a taunt, so I have to try to hit a taunt on 7. I really need that Bog Creeper. I didn't get a Bog Creeper. I still need a taunt? Okay, let me try again. Here's Tyrion. Essentially, it gives you the power to control your outcomes. You play until you get a taunt. You play until you get a healing card. You try for your outs. You settle for great value at Karen instead of reaching too far for Tyrion. As long as you have a minion on board that you can use with Unstable Evolution, it gives you that power. And frankly, I think that means on average you're going to get a really good result because you're going to know when to stop. You're going to know when it fits the situation or the game plan or the meta deck you're playing against. And that's going to make Unstable Evolution a great card. And I didn't even talk about the fact that you can use this on multiple minions in a single turn as well. You don't have to pile it all into one thing. You have 3 or 4 minions on board. You cast Unstable Evolution on one. You like what you get. You try the next one. Maybe it doesn't work. You try it twice. You move to the 3rd minion. You have to try it 3 times. It's just the ultimate in flexibility. So it can serve as a sort of, flexible board-wide evolve if you have spare mana laying around and you want to hit targets that make a lot of sense. It can serve as that single target buff, turning that Wisp into a 12/12 Deathwing Dragonlord. Whatever you need, Unstable Evolution meets the need. I just absolutely love this design. It's so cool, so unique, so different. Influences strategic, great thought processes, decision-making. It's a complex card that rewards good play. They nailed this one. Blizzard hit Unstable Evolution out of the park. Both wonderfully designed, but also a really, really powerful card. That said, that's going to wrap it up for my detailed reviews of these 3 cards. What I'd like to do now is jump into my quick reviews. Skull of the Man'ari is a 1-star card. Geosculptor Yip is a 3-star card. And Unstable Evolution is a 5-star card. And there you go, guys. That's it for part 11 of my Kobolds and Catacombs card review. I'm curious what you guys think about these 2 new legendaries. Do you hate the Warlock legendary weapon as much as I do? Do you think weapon removal is going to completely ruin any chance for that card to ever succeed? I want to hear your thoughts on that one. Of course, the other 2 cards as well. Leave those all in the comments below. But until then, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, game on.